So I actually thought it was just me. I've been away from YouTube for about a week or so, some personal stuff to sort out. And coming back to Twitter yesterday, I saw that there was a lot of posts about Israel Adesanya versus Dricus Du Plessis. We had a lot of like MMA media shills posting out that this was Israel Adesanya's time. You know, we're 7 days away from the return of one of the greatest champions in UFC history. Israel Adesanya helped carry the sport on his back, competing in 16 fights in 5 years. When his back is against the wall, he's a dangerous man. Alexander Volkanovski predicting that we will see a highlight reel, a knockout from Israel Adesanya versus Dricus Du Plessis. I think that he's just going to put on that type of performance where he goes out there with this crazy ass finish. And we had numerous YouTubers doing their breakdown or their preview of this fight. And again, if you look at someone like Michael Bisping, he talks ad nauseum, like maybe 9 minutes of how brilliant Israel Adesanya is, how great he is, that there's never going to be a middleweight like him, that he held up the division so well on his back and probably the promotion as well, that he's probably like the second most entertaining and well-known fighter in the world. This is all copium because at the end of that video, he actually wanted to say that Dricus was an awkward fight for him and that he might lose, but he had to pad it out with 9 minutes of jargon building up Israel Adesanya. So I came back to social media yesterday and I was having a little look around like that, and that's the narrative that's been spun. And I was thinking, was it just me, or is there actually no interest surrounding this fight, or possibly just the UFC at the moment in general? So I jump over to YouTube and I see that Lucas Tracy, one of the biggest MMA content creators on the platform, has retired, allegedly. Now I don't know how true it is. I've seen James Lynch and I've seen Guru talking about it, going, this is a crazy decision. He must have something big going on in the background, something a little bit more monetary profitable. I don't know. It's crazy to see someone who has built his channel all the way up to over 100,000 bounce out of there. But is it because of the energy surrounding the UFC at the moment? Because I'm not excited for this Israel Adesanya fight. I didn't even watch the fight card on the weekend. Is there like a dissipation in interest in UFC? Or is it the fact, now this will be controversial, but is it the fact that covering the fights and covering what the MMA media shills are saying gets stagnant, and you have to do the alternative stuff, something like the Guru, the Jesse on Fire, and possibly even myself, where you go and you look at stories from different angles? Because covering them in this like previewing a card, yes, it's entertaining, and there's a huge number of just normie MMA fans that are out there that want to consume that content, but in the same breath, if you actually look at where the world is in terms of being polarized, everything on social media is political, it's left, it's right. That is bleeding into our content, that's bleeding into our sports. And I think it's becoming more necessary to actually come at these stories of the UFC, because as we know, the fighters are all getting involved in social and political interactions online, and come at them from a different angle and a different perspective, and just add that little element of what we're seeing in everyday life into our actual sport. Because in fairness, nobody is really interested in Israel Adesanya. You can hype him up as much as you want. Volkanovski can go out there and talk about these crazy, awkward knockouts that he achieved against Robert Whittaker or against Paulo Costa or against Alex Pereira, but nobody actually cares. And doesn't matter what Israel does. And it really is him who's trying to fuel, especially this racial feud going into this fight. So he's building it up to be this massive thing in his head. Nobody is falling in behind him in terms of that narrative. It's actually cringe, delusional, and embarrassing. And never more so than this week. I've seen him be cringe and embarrassing throughout his entire career. But what he's at this week is crazy. And he's getting called out left, right, and center on it. Your family is richer than his. Israel Adesanya exposed by fans as dirty accusations on Dricus Du Plessis before UFC 305 backfires. So they're talking about this interview that he did where he goes after Dricus Du Plessis for living behind a gated community, for being privileged, and it's delusional. Let's have a listen.
It's not personal. Like, it's not personal. I just want him to take accountability for his remarks. And I'm also glad my friend Razak, Abdul Razak, said it before his fight about 3 weeks ago, saying like, I respect Dricus, but he's a bitch for what he said. He's a bitch because Dricus is saying, I train in Africa, I do this in Africa. And then people like Razak and myself who are forced to flee our own country because of, a better opportunity. Yeah. He can't even, he'll never understand that because he lives behind the gates of his privileged life in South Africa, and he's able to do that there. So someone like Francis, who had to cross the desert to go overseas to go train, if you know Francis' story, you can't call him not a real African champion. He would have never been champion. We paved the way for him, and then he comes out there and tries to take it all for himself. I wonder where he got that from. What kind of mindset is that? Like, that's a colonialist mindset. and he doesn't understand the error of his ways. But I will show him the way.
So there's a lot to unpack there, and we'll just skip through it really fast, right? This is a deep-rooted hatred for Dricus Du Plessis, right? I've seen videos and posts on social media where Israel is sending private messages and receiving private messages, and it's all about colonizer talk and all this type of stuff, right? This has offended him to his very core. He says here that himself and Abdul Razak, or whatever that nutcase's name was, I covered a video on him a couple of weeks ago where he went off on this crazy rant. The dude has a very, very, very dodgy history, which I covered in the video. Go back and have a look at that. I'll put a link to it in the description. The dude is a wreck of a yoke. So Israel's hatred for the colonizer Dricus Du Plessis is so deep-rooted that he has to quote some alleged criminal, some dodgy dude who's been arrested and banned from the UFC for 2 years because of accusations. You got to go and quote that dude to try bolster your argument. Then you start fumbling and falling over yourself in terms of not having an idea what you're talking about. Then you automatically jump to Francis Ngannou. Again, using other Africans who actually had to flee the country for a better life to bolster your argument. So you're saying that yourself and that other nutjob had to flee for a better life. You didn't have to flee, and you got called out by all the fans online. I don't know how you can actually sit there on the run up to this fight with a straight face after making a crazy statement like that, because we know that you had servants and that you had to learn how to brush your teeth when you were like 10 years old because someone was actually brushing your teeth for you. And people go, that's a myth, bro. He didn't say that. He did say that.
He's a bitch for what he said. He's a bitch because Dricus is saying, I train in Africa, I do this in Africa. And then people like Razak and myself who are forced to flee our own country because of, a better opportunity. He'll never understand that because he lives behind gates of his privileged life in South Africa, and he's able to do that there.
Yeah, I didn't even know how to bathe for myself till I was about 8 or 7 or something, because we had housemates, cooking for us, bathing us. And it wasn't until I think maybe 8 years old I realized this wasn't like every kid that had that. So I was like, nah, I can do it myself now. Brush my own teeth.
This is not news. This is something that's been covered over and over again by many different people on the platform. And it still amazes me that the media go out there, run cover for Israel Adesanya, Volkanovski, Michael Bisping, all these MMA media shills over on Twitter. Can we not actually just talk about the truth? Is that why MMA media is stagnant now? Is that why we see these huge YouTubers, over 1 million subscribers, getting really small numbers because they're talking about just mundane gaslighting surrounding UFC or MMA content in general? There's a reason why MMA Guru is the biggest guy on the platform. No one's even close to him. No one can touch him. It's because he comes at stuff from a different angle, and people are hungry for that content and they want to see that content. I'm not saying that it's a negative in terms of watching the previews and breakdowns of fights. That's awesome. I watch them myself. But also, when you see someone as prominent as Israel Adesanya and everybody is talking in positives about him, especially on the run up to this Dricus Du Plessis fight. I don't know any of the big content creators, any of the big ex-fighters that have come out and backed Dricus's corner in this fake feud that Israel keeps fueling. If anything, a lot of these woke normies that put out content all the time should be bolstering Dricus's point of view when he says, I don't want to talk about race. That's garbage. I never said any of this, which he didn't, and we all know that because we covered it before. Basically, what you have is this triggered black lad who was rich, had servants, had people brushing his teeth, had people bathing him, left Africa, as many do, and went to a Western country that accepted them in. And of course, he turned his back on them and started flying the Nigerian flag. Then he flew the Chinese flag. And so it's pathetic in general. But where are the guys calling out Israel and bolstering Dricus? Surely that would actually benefit the UFC a lot more in terms of the normie woke view that the owners of the UFC want to push. Not Dana White. The owners. We have a fighter here who's making everything about race and colonization and all this crazy stuff whilst fiddling around with dogs and wearing nail varnish. Surely they would be backing the side of Dricus Du Plessis, who wants to step away from all that racial garbage and just make it about the sport. Nope. We got to back Israel Adesanya for some reason. It's very, very interesting. I think out of all the articles that I read, this one from Pink Villa, which is like an Indian outlet content creator of some sorts, actually hits the nail on the head. At the end of the article, they say here that fans believe that the hype for Israel Adesanya versus Dricus Du Plessis has died down. The bad blood that both contenders had towards each other fizzled out. Neither fighter was going at each other in the way that they used to. However, Izzy's recent comments, the feud is believed to be reignited. It's not. It's not reignited. you were actually right the first time. It has all fizzled out. The only one that's actually propagating and promoting this feud or this garbage racial side of the feud is Israel Adesanya. When is there someone going to call it out? When we have TMZ videos coming out this week of what Israel Adesanya has said in terms of we had to flee for a better life, talking about colonization, having to bring up Francis Ngannou to bolster your argument. Prominent MMA outlets posting out articles like this saying that your family is richer than his. Israel is exposed again for his hypocrisy. Still nobody picks up the story. If the UFC content creators out there, if the ex-UFC fighters who have podcasts, and if the UFC in general are feeling that there's a lull in energy within your community, within your arena, how about telling the truth and reigniting that fire and bringing back all the people that are bailing out and bouncing out because they are tired of being gaslit? So my advice would be to actually call out Israel Adesanya for saying absolutely ludicrous shit.
I've never been more motivated in my life to kill a man. And watch this, just stay tuned. Stay tuned.
And apply that same metric to every other fighter and every other upcoming card. And I think that you'll generate a lot more curiosity and a lot more content and a lot more clicks. Let me know down below if any of it made sense. Cheers.